The crystalline chamber floated in the void between stars, a monument to power that had stood for 10,000 years. Inside, 12 species sat in judgment. Their forms varied wildly. Some walked on legs, others floated in containment fields, and one existed as pure thought translated through machines. But they all shared one thing, the absolute certainty that they ruled the galaxy. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the center of the chamber alone. The designers had made it that way on purpose. Anyone who stood where she stood was meant to feel small. The ceiling stretched up forever, or at least it seemed that way. The walls were made of some material that showed the stars beyond, making her feel like she was floating in space with nothing to hold on to. She wasn't afraid. That seemed to bother them. High Arbiter Velsharn rose from his seat. He was massive, easily 4 meters tall, with a body that looked like a praying mantis crossed with something from a nightmare. His kind had been traveling between stars when humans still lived in caves. His voice came out in clicks and whistles, but the translator in her ear made it sound like dry leaves scraping stone. "Human Chen," he said, and the way he said human made it sound like an insult. "The council has deliberated. We have reached our decision regarding your species." Sarah said nothing. She'd learned that silence made them uncomfortable. They expected her to beg or argue or show some emotion they could use against her. Instead, she just looked at him and waited. Another council member spoke up. This one looked like a floating jellyfish made of light. "In the 50 years since humanity discovered faster-than-light travel, you have established 17 colony worlds. You have built weapons. You have expanded at a rate that violates every standard protocol. We followed all agreements," Sarah said quietly. "You followed the letter while violating the spirit," Velsharn snapped. "Your military grows every year. Your ships improve with every generation. You ask too many questions about things that don't concern you. Your scientists probe boundaries that should not be crossed." A third voice joined in, this one belonging to something that looked like a boulder with eyes. "You are dangerous. Young species always are. They reach for the stars before they learn wisdom." Sarah almost laughed at that. Wisdom. They called it wisdom when what they really meant was obedience. Velsharn held up one of his blade-like arms. The chamber fell silent. "Therefore, the Council has issued the following directive. Humanity will reduce its military forces by 90% within 1 standard year. All vessels larger than frigate class will be dismantled. You will cease all research into advanced weapon systems. Your 17 colony worlds will accept Council peacekeeping forces to ensure compliance." He paused, and Sarah could have sworn she saw satisfaction in his alien eyes. "Furthermore, Earth itself will host a Council garrison. This is not negotiable. This is not a request. This is the judgment of the Galactic Council, and it will be obeyed." The other council members made various sounds of agreement. Sarah noticed that a few of them looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. The council had spoken. The council was always right. That was how it had been for 10,000 years. Sarah took a breath. She thought about Earth, about the blue marble floating in space 20 light-years away. She thought about the colonies, about children playing under alien suns. She thought about the millions of people who had looked at the stars and decided that humanity deserved to be there. "No," she said. The word hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Velsharn tilted his head. The translator made it sound like bones cracking. "Explain yourself." "No," Sarah repeated. "Humanity declines your directive. We will not dismantle our ships. We will not reduce our military. We will not accept foreign troops on our worlds. With respect, High Arbiter, you have no authority to give us these orders." The chamber erupted. Voices shouted in a dozen languages, the translators struggling to keep up. One council member actually stood up, something that apparently hadn't happened in centuries. The jellyfish being's light pulsed angry red. Velsharn raised both arms. Silence crashed down like a physical force. "No species," he said, and his voice was very quiet now, which somehow made it worse, "has ever refused a unanimous council directive. Not in 10,000 years. Do you understand what you're doing?" "Yes," Sarah said. "We're exercising our right as a sovereign species to determine our own fate." "You have no such right," another council member said. "The council maintains order. The council prevents war. The council decides what is best for all species." "Then the council is wrong," Sarah said simply. Velsharn stared at her for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of ages. "Very well. Humanity has 6 standard months to reconsider. We are not unreasonable. We understand that young species sometimes make foolish choices. You have 6 months to comply with our directive. And if we don't? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Then the council will take corrective action, Velsharn said. This has happened before. Species who defy the council do not prosper. They are brought into compliance one way or another. Some peacefully, others... He let the sentence hang. Is that a threat? Sarah asked. It is a fact, Velsharn replied. The council protects the galaxy from external threats and from internal ones. If humanity will not accept our guidance willingly, you will accept it by force. This meeting is concluded. You will leave now. Sarah bowed slightly, a gesture that was more insulting than polite in Velsharn's culture. She'd done her research. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the vast chamber, and she could feel 12 pairs of alien eyes watching her back. As the door sealed behind her, she heard Velsharn speaking to the other council members. The translator in her ear still worked. Prepare the compliance fleet, he said. Humanity will learn what every other species has learned. The council's word is law. Sarah walked to her ship through corridors that had been designed to make visitors feel insignificant. She passed other species, other ambassadors, all of them watching her with expressions she couldn't read. Word had already spread. The humans had said no. The humans were going to be destroyed. Her pilot was waiting, a young man named Torres who'd been with her for 3 years. Ambassador, he asked. What happened? We're going home, Sarah said. And we need to send a message to Admiral Webb. What message? Sarah looked out the viewport at the crystalline structure growing smaller behind them. Tell him to implement Protocol Defiance. Tell him we have 6 months. Tell him. She paused. Tell him the council just made the biggest mistake in its 10,000-year history. The ship jumped to faster than light speed, leaving the council behind. In the chamber, Velsharn was already issuing orders. Fleet commanders were being summoned. Battle plans were being drawn. The greatest military force in galactic history was beginning to assemble. None of them knew what humanity had been building in the darkness. None of them suspected what 6 months of silence would bring. They thought they were dealing with a young, foolish species that would learn its place. They were about to learn something instead. They were about to learn what happened when you threatened humanity's children. The first month passed without incident. Council observers watched the human colonies from a distance, waiting for signs of compliance. The military shipyards kept working. The defense platforms remained active. Nothing changed. The second month brought confusion. Human ships began moving in strange patterns, jumping to systems that weren't on any trade route. When Council surveillance drones tried to follow, they simply vanished. No distress signals, no debris, just empty space where advanced monitoring equipment should have been. By the third month, the Council was getting worried. Not afraid, of course. The Council didn't do fear. But High Arbiter Velsharn called meetings more often than usual. His voice carried an edge when he spoke about the human problem. They're hiding something, said Council Member Thrace, the jellyfish being whose light had turned from its normal blue to a concerned purple. 3 dozen surveillance drones have disappeared. That's not random equipment failure. They're destroying our property, another member growled. This one looked like an armored centipede the size of a bus. That alone justifies immediate action. Velsharn waved one bladed arm dismissively. We gave them 6 months. We will honor our word, but yes, increase surveillance. I want to know what they're doing. What they found confused them more. Human colonies appeared empty on long-range scans. Not destroyed, not abandoned in panic, just empty. Buildings stood intact. Automated systems kept running. Agricultural bots tended crops that nobody would harvest. But there were no life signs. No heat signatures. No evidence that millions of humans had simply evaporated. Where did they go? Thrace asked during one emergency session. You can't evacuate 17 colonies without someone noticing. Perhaps they fled to Earth, suggested the bolder being. Cowards running home to hide, but Earth showed the same pattern. Orbital traffic had dropped to almost nothing. The moonbase appeared operational but empty. Mars colony wasn't responding to hails. It was like humanity had packed up and left without telling anyone where they were going. A younger council member, one who'd voted against the ultimatum in the first place, spoke up hesitantly. Has anyone considered that maybe we should try talking to them again? The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Velsharn turned his massive head slowly. Are you questioning the Council's decision? No, High Arbiter. I'm just saying that this silence is unusual. In every other case where we issued compliance directives, the target species either surrendered or fought immediately. They never just vanished. They're playing games, Velsharn said flatly, trying to make us cautious. It won't work. The compliance fleet is almost ready. When 6 months have passed, we will enter human space and restore order. End of discussion. But privately, some council members were less certain. They pulled old records from their archives looking for similar situations. They found nothing that matched. Young species were supposed to behave predictably. They begged for mercy or they fought with primitive weapons. They didn't disappear into the dark. Month 4 brought a new development. A council research station on the edge of known space picked up a transmission. It was short, barely 3 seconds long and heavily encrypted. But they cracked it eventually. The message was simple. You shouldn't have threatened our children. The station commander immediately forwarded it to the council. Velsharn studied it for a long time. Trace the source, he ordered. They tried. The transmission had bounced off relay stations scattered across 100 light-years. The original source could have been anywhere. Could have been nowhere. Could have been everywhere at once. It's psychological warfare, Velsharn decided. They want us to be nervous. Ignore it. But he increased the compliance fleet's size anyway. 3,000 warships now, drawn from 8 different council species. It was the largest military force assembled in living memory. Maybe the largest ever. Ships that hadn't fired their weapons in centuries were being pulled out of mothballs and upgraded. The commanders were confident. How could they not be? Each of their ships had been built by civilizations with thousands of years of experience. Their weapons could crack planets. Their shields had been tested against every known threat. 3,000 ships like that could conquer half the galaxy if they wanted to. Against humanity's few hundred military vessels, most of them barely 50 years old, the outcome seemed obvious. Month 5 brought more strangeness. A cargo hauler from a neutral species reported seeing something in deep space, far from any settled system. They'd dropped out of FTL for repairs and noticed lights in the distance. Thousands of lights moving in formation. When they got closer to investigate, the lights disappeared. Probably stellar phenomena, the Council's scientists said. Or sensor ghosts. Deep space does strange things to equipment. But more reports came in. A passenger liner saw massive shapes moving in the dark between stars. A mining operation reported their equipment detecting artificial gravity wells where nothing should exist. A survey team found a planet that hadn't been there on their charts, except when they went back to look again, it was gone. They're out there, Thrace said quietly during a council session, building something. We just don't know what. It doesn't matter what they're building, Velsharn replied. The compliance fleet will handle whatever primitive resistance they offer. But he ordered the fleet to accelerate its preparations anyway. On Earth, in the empty cities and silent streets, automated systems kept working. Lights turned on and off on schedule. Traffic signals changed for cars that never came. Weather satellites sent data to research stations where nobody watched. It looked like the end of the world, except nothing had been destroyed. Humanity had simply left. The only sign of life was at the old United Nations building. There, a single flag still flew. Someone was maintaining it, keeping it clean, making sure it waved in the wind. Council observers zoomed in on it with their long-range cameras, trying to understand the message. The flag was new. It wasn't any national flag or the old UN banner. It was black with a simple design in white, a human hand reaching toward stars. And written beneath in a dozen languages, including the Council's official script, a single phrase: "We will not kneel." Month 6 arrived. The deadline had come. High Arbiter Velsharn stood before the assembled council with something approaching satisfaction. Behind him on screens, the compliance fleet waited. 3,000 warships, crews numbering in the millions. Enough firepower to sterilize 100 worlds. The humans have not complied, he announced. They have not responded to our messages. They have not dismantled their military. They have in fact ignored us completely. Therefore, the compliance fleet will depart immediately for human space. They will locate the human leadership, force their surrender, and occupy their worlds. Does any council member object? Thrace's light flickered uncertainly. The younger member who'd spoken up before looked like he wanted to say something. But nobody objected. The council had spoken. The council was always right. Then it is decided, Velsharn said. Admiral Kresh, you may proceed. On the screens, the compliance fleet began to move. 3,000 ships all entering FTL at once, tearing holes in space as they jumped toward human territory. It would take them 3 days to reach the Sirius system, humanity's first colony beyond Earth. That's where they would start. That's where humanity would learn what happened when you defied the Council. In empty cities across human space, lights continued to turn on and off. The flag at the UN building kept flying, and somewhere in the dark between stars, millions of engines that the Council didn't know about were warming up for the journey home. The compliance fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sirius system, like a hammer coming down on an anvil. 3,000 warships, their weapons charged and shields raised, ready for battle. Admiral Kresh stood on the bridge of his flagship, all 6 of his arms folded across his chest in a gesture that meant confidence in his species. Scan the system, he ordered. Find me the human defense fleet. His sensor operator worked for several minutes, her face growing more confused with each passing second. Admiral, I'm not detecting any defense fleet. No warships at all. The orbital platforms are there, but they're powered down. Minimal energy signatures from the colony itself. Kresh unfolded one arm and pointed at the main view screen. Visual confirmation. The screen flickered to life, showing Sirius colony from 1,000,000 kilometers away. The settlement sprawled across a large moon, domes and towers glittering in the light of the binary stars. But there were no ships moving between the orbital facilities. No defense drones patrolling, nothing. They abandoned it, Kresh's second-in-command said. Cowards ran away. No, Kresh said slowly. The power is still on. Life support is running. They didn't abandon it. They evacuated it. There's a difference. Does it matter? Another officer asked. We have our orders. Occupy the colony and move on to the next one. Kresh nodded, but something felt wrong. He'd been a warrior for 40 years. He'd fought in 3 campaigns against species that thought they could ignore the Council. He knew what defeat looked like, and this wasn't it. This felt like a trap, except there was nothing to spring it with. No hidden fleet, no weapon platforms warming up, just empty space and a silent colony. Advance to the inner system, he ordered. Battle formation. Stay alert. The fleet moved forward, 3,000 ships spreading into a formation that had been perfected over centuries. They approached Sirius colony carefully, scanning for any sign of resistance. There was none. The automated systems on the orbital platforms didn't even target them. It was like the humans had just left the door open and walked away. This is wrong. Thrace's voice came over the command channel. The Council member had insisted on accompanying the fleet, watching from an observation ship in the rear. Admiral Kresh, I recommend caution. Noted, Council member, Kresh replied. But we have orders. Fleet, prepare to enter the Sol system. That's where they'll make their stand if they're going to make one at all. The fleet jumped again, leaving Sirius behind. When they dropped back into normal space at the edge of Earth's solar system, every officer on every ship felt their confidence waver for the first time. The Sol system looked the same as Sirius, empty. The orbital platforms around Mars were dark. The moon base showed minimal power. Earth itself was there, beautiful and blue and completely undefended. But there were no ships, no military fleet waiting to protect humanity's home, nothing. Where are they? Someone whispered on the command channel. Doesn't matter, Kresh said, though he didn't sound as sure as before. We came here to enforce the Council's will. If they won't fight, we occupy their worlds and wait for their leadership to surrender. Fleet, advance toward Earth. Standard approach, stay in formation. The fleet moved forward. They passed the orbit of Neptune, then Uranus. Still nothing. Saturn's rings glittered in the distance, peaceful and undisturbed. They passed Jupiter's massive bulk, its storms swirling as they had for billions of years. Mars grew larger ahead of them, red and silent. Then Kresh's sensor operator made a sound. Not a word, just a sound like someone who'd forgotten how to speak. What is it? Kresh demanded. Sir, the sensors are malfunctioning. I'm getting strange readings. The system is filled with interference. From what? There's nothing out here but us. I don't know, sir. It's like the sensors are being jammed, but there's no jamming signal. It's more like there's something between us and the stars. Something blocking the signals. Kresh looked at the view screen. Space looked normal. Stars in the distance. The sun ahead. Nothing unusual. Run a diagnostic. Fix it. But the sensor operator's voice was shaking now. Sir, it's not just us. I'm getting similar reports from the entire fleet. Everyone's sensors are showing the same thing. There's something out there. Something big. Visual scan, Kresh ordered. Show me what's out there. The view screen adjusted, enhancing the image. At first, Kresh saw nothing unusual. Then he noticed it. A star had disappeared. Just one, far in the distance, but it had definitely been there a second ago. Then another star vanished. Then 3 more. Then a dozen. What's happening? His second-in-command asked. The stars kept disappearing. Not randomly, but in a pattern, like something huge was moving in front of them, something so big it was blocking out the light from distant suns. Kresh felt his blood go cold. That wasn't possible. Nothing was that big. Nothing except planets or stars themselves, and those didn't move. Then the sensor operator screamed. Contact! Multiple contacts. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Sir, they're everywhere. The view screen erupted with data. Red icons appeared around the fleet, so many that they overlapped into a solid mass. The computer tried to count them and gave up. The number kept climbing. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 more, battle stations. Kresh roared. All ships, shields to maximum. Weapons free! Find me a target. But there were too many targets. The sensors couldn't process them all. Ships began appearing on the view screen, dropping out of FTL in perfect silence. They were smaller than council vessels, sleeker, with designs that didn't match anything in the database. And there were millions of them. The sky was literally darkening. Everywhere Kresh looked, human ships were appearing, so many that they blocked out the stars. They moved in perfect formation like schools of fish or flocks of birds, thousands of vessels acting as a single organism. The fleet's 3,000 ships suddenly looked tiny, insignificant like pebbles in an ocean. How? Someone whispered. Where did they all come from? Kresh didn't have an answer. 6 months ago, humanity had maybe 500 military vessels. Now they had millions. It wasn't possible. You couldn't build that many ships in 6 months. You couldn't crew them or fuel them or coordinate them. It broke every rule of logistics and engineering that the Council had developed over 10,000 years. But the ships were there, real and solid and completely surrounding the compliance fleet. They weren't firing. They weren't moving aggressively. They were just there, a wall of metal and power that stretched in every direction. The Council's mighty fleet was a single drop of water in an ocean of human ships. Every screen in the fleet suddenly changed. The same image appeared everywhere, on every bridge, on every ship. A human face, male, older, with gray hair and eyes that had seen combat. He wore a military uniform that was simple and practical, with stars on the collar. My name is Admiral Marcus Webb, the human said. His voice was calm, like he was discussing the weather. Commander of the United Human Defense Fleet, you came to our home. You came to threaten our families. You came with guns and demands and the arrogance of bullies who've never been punched back. He paused, and something like disappointment crossed his face. You're not welcome here. Turn your ships around and leave. Don't come back. Forget you ever gave us orders. This is the only warning you'll get. Kresh felt every eye on his bridge turn to him. The sensor operator was crying. His second-in-command looked like he might be sick. Even the officers who'd been so confident before were silent now, staring at the view screen where millions of human ships waited. From his observation vessel, Thrace's voice came over the private channel. Admiral, I strongly suggest we accept their offer. But High Arbiter Velsharn was also on that channel, watching from the council chambers light years away. His voice crackled with fury. You will not retreat. The council does not back down from threats. You have 3,000 warships, Admiral. Use them. Kresh looked at the screens showing the human fleet. 3,000 ships against millions. The mathematics were very simple, but the council had given an order. The council was always right. The council couldn't show weakness. He activated the fleet-wide channel. All ships, he said, and his voice sounded tired even to himself. Prepare to fire on my mark. On the view screen, Admiral Webb sighed. It was a very human gesture, full of regret. We tried diplomacy, he said softly. Then he smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile at all. Light them up. The compliance fleet fired first. 3,000 warships unleashing everything they had at once. Energy beams that could crack a moon. Missiles that could level cities. Plasma cannons hot enough to vaporize steel. It was the most devastating barrage in Council history, all of it directed at the human ships that surrounded them. The weapons crossed the space between the fleets in seconds. On the council ships, crews held their breath. In the council chambers, Velsharn leaned forward. This was it. This was where the humans would learn their lesson. No species could stand against this kind of firepower. The weapons reached the human fleet. Every single shot, every beam, every missile simply stopped. Not exploded, not deflected, stopped, hanging in space for a moment like they'd hit an invisible wall, then dissipated into nothing. Not a single human ship was even scratched. On Admiral Kresh's bridge, the silence was absolute. His weapons officer stared at her console like it had personally betrayed her. "Sir," she said, voice barely a whisper. "Our weapons had no effect. 0 damage. It's like we were shooting at shadows." Admiral Webb's face was still on every screen. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, like a teacher whose student had failed a test they'd had plenty of time to study for. "You were warned," he said simply. Then the human fleet moved. Not all of it. Just a few thousand ships breaking formation and accelerating toward the council fleet. They moved fast. Faster than anything that size should be able to move. And they didn't slow down as they approached. "Incoming!" someone shouted on Kresh's bridge. "Collision course! Multiple vectors! Evasive action!" Kresh ordered. "All ships scatter formation." But there was nowhere to scatter to. The human fleet was everywhere. And then something impossible happened. The human ships reached the council vessels and passed right through them. Not around them. Through them. Like ghosts, like they weren't even real. Kresh watched on his view screen as a human destroyer flew straight through his flagship's hull, without causing any damage. He felt nothing. No impact, no vibration. The ship just phased through solid matter like it didn't exist. "What kind of technology is this?" his second-in-command whispered. Kresh didn't answer because he didn't know. This was beyond anything in the Council's databases. Matter didn't just pass through matter. That wasn't how physics worked. Except apparently it was how human physics worked now. Then things got worse. The human ships that had passed through the Council fleet turned around and did something else that shouldn't be possible. They generated gravity wells. Artificial gravity. Strong enough that Kresh could feel it on his bridge. The Council ships began to drift toward these wells, pulled by forces they couldn't resist. Ships that had been in careful formation were suddenly being dragged together, clustering around the human vessels like metal to a magnet. "Full power to engines," Kresh ordered. "Break free." They couldn't. The Council ships, massive and powerful as they were, might as well have been rowing boats trying to escape a whirlpool. The human gravity wells were too strong. Within minutes, the entire compliance fleet was trapped in clusters of 100 or more ships, all of them held in place by technology that shouldn't exist, and the humans still hadn't fired a single shot. Admiral Webb's voice came through the speakers again. "Your weapons are offline. Your engines are locked. Your communications are jammed except for this channel. You are completely at our mercy. Do you understand yet? Do you see what you walked into?" In the council chambers, High Arbiter Velsharn was standing now, all four arms extended in a gesture of shock. Around him, other council members sat in stunned silence. Some were making calls to their home systems, trying to get military advisors to explain what they were seeing. Others just stared at the screens showing their mighty fleet helpless and trapped. Thrace's light had turned from purple to a deep, horrified blue. "This isn't possible," he said. 6 months ago they were barely spacefaring. How did they do this? On Kresh's bridge, the same question echoed. "Sir," his science officer said, "I'm analyzing the technology they're using. The phase shifting, the gravity manipulation, the point defense that stopped all our weapons. Sir, this isn't just advanced. This is beyond advanced. This is technology that theory says shouldn't be possible for another 1,000 years of development. Then how do they have it?" Kresh demanded. "I don't know, sir, unless—" The science officer trailed off, looking at his screens. "Unless they found something. Something old. There are legends about precursor races, species that existed before the Council, species that had technology we still don't understand. But those are just stories. Except they weren't just stories. Not anymore." Admiral Webb's image on the screens changed. Now he was sitting in what looked like a command center, surrounded by displays showing the trapped Council fleet. "Let me tell you what happened during your 6 months," he said. "While you were building your compliance fleet and planning how to put us in our place, we were busy. We found something in deep space, something your Council either never discovered or deliberately hid from younger species. He gestured, and the screens changed. Images appeared of a massive structure floating in the dark between stars. It was ancient, clearly alien, and absolutely enormous. It made a planet look small. We call it the Archive, Webb continued, a library left behind by whoever came before. And it had some very interesting information. Blueprints, scientific principles, warnings. He paused. Warnings about the Council, actually. Apparently, you're not the first group to declare yourselves the rulers of the galaxy. You're just the most recent. Velsharn's voice cut through, transmitted to the entire fleet. You lie! The Council has maintained peace for 10,000 years. The Council has maintained control for 10,000 years, Webb corrected. There's a difference. And yes, you've prevented wars. But you've also prevented progress. Any species that got too advanced, too independent, too creative, you crushed them. You called it maintaining order. The Archive called it something else. More images appeared. Records of species that had defied the Council before. Some had been destroyed. Others had been conquered and their technology confiscated. All of them had one thing in common. They'd started asking questions the Council didn't want answered. So we took what we found in the Archive, Webb said. And we built a fleet. Not to conquer anyone, not to rule the galaxy, just to make sure that nobody would ever threaten our children again. He stood up, and now his voice carried an edge. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to escort your fleet to Luna. That's Earth's moon. We'll give you supplies, medical care if you need it, and then you're going home. All of you. Every ship. Every crew member. We're not keeping prisoners. We're not taking revenge. But you need to understand something very clearly. The view changed again, showing the human fleet from the perspective of the trapped Council ships. Millions of vessels, all of them dark and sleek and powerful, surrounding the compliance fleet like a promise and a threat. If you come back, Webb said quietly, we won't be this nice. On Kresh's bridge, nobody spoke. What was there to say? They'd come with 3,000 ships expecting to crush a primitive species. Instead, they'd been captured without a single casualty. Their weapons useless, their ships trapped, their confidence shattered. The Council's reputation of invincibility, built over 10,000 years, had crumbled in less than 10 minutes. Thrace's voice, small and defeated, came over the private channel. Admiral Kresh, I recommend we accept their terms. Kresh nodded slowly. What choice did they have? Fleet-wide transmission, he said. All ships are to stand down. We are accepting the human terms. No resistance. No heroics. We're going home. From the Council chambers, Velsharn started to protest, but someone cut his transmission. When it came back, it wasn't Velsharn's voice anymore. It was one of the younger Council members, the one who'd urged caution from the beginning. This is Council Member Tarn, the voice said. High Arbiter Velsharn has been temporarily removed from command. Admiral Kresh, do as you must. Get our people home safely. Webb smiled slightly. Smart choice. The Archive had some things to say about pride, too. It doesn't end well. Follow the course we're transmitting. Don't deviate. Don't try anything clever. Just go home and tell your Council that humanity wants peace, but we won't kneel for it. The human ships began to move, forming a corridor through their fleet. The gravity wells released their hold on the Council vessels one by one, and they started moving toward Luna, escorted by ships that had just demonstrated they could destroy the entire fleet without breaking a sweat. As they passed Earth, Kresh looked at the blue planet on his view screen. It looked peaceful, beautiful, harmless. But now he knew the truth. Humanity wasn't harmless. They were just choosing not to be harmful. There was a very big difference, and the entire galaxy was about to learn it. The compliance fleet limped home 3 weeks later, not because their ships were damaged, but because their pride was. 3,000 warships, the greatest military force the Council had assembled in living memory, returning without firing a single effective shot. Word had already spread across the galaxy. The humans had said no. The Council had sent a fleet. The humans had made the fleet look like children playing with toys. In the Council chambers on Axiom Prime, everything had changed. High Arbiter Velsharn was gone, removed from his position by a vote that had taken less than an hour. The ancient Mantis being had ruled for 3 centuries, but his certainty that the Council's will was absolute had broken against human determination. Now he was in his private quarters, alone, trying to understand what had happened. The Council itself was in chaos. Half the members were demanding immediate retaliation. The other half were calling for caution. A few of the younger species were quietly asking if maybe, just maybe, the humans had a point. Council member Tarn, who'd taken temporary leadership, stood before the assembly. He was small compared to most council members, barely 2 meters tall with a body covered in blue scales that shimmered when he was nervous. Right now they were shimmering like crazy. "We need to face facts," he said. "The humans have technology beyond our understanding. They demonstrated it could defeat our entire fleet without casualties on either side. If they wanted to destroy us, they could have. They chose not to. That tells us something important. It tells us they're weak," one of the older members roared. "They had us at their mercy and let us go. We should gather a larger fleet and try again." "With what?" Tarn asked quietly. "Every ship we have?" The humans had millions of vessels. Millions. Where did you want to find millions of ships to counter them? And what makes you think our weapons would work any better the second time? The chamber fell silent. Nobody had an answer to that. Then something unexpected happened. A transmission came through, broadcast on all council channels simultaneously. It was Ambassador Sarah Chen, the human who'd stood in this very chamber 6 months ago and said no. She looked exactly the same, calm and collected like nothing had changed. "Greetings, council members," she said. "I wanted to update you on humanity's position, since I imagine there's some confusion right now." "You have no right to address this council," one of the older members shouted. "Actually, I do," Sarah replied, "because we're not asking permission anymore. We tried being polite. We tried diplomacy. You responded with threats. So now we're going to explain how things work from now on, and you're going to listen." Thrace's light flickered uncertainly. "You're declaring war on the council?" "No," Sarah said. "We don't want war. We never did. But we're also not going to let you dictate terms to us or any other species. So here's what's going to happen. The council as it exists is over. Not destroyed, but reformed. We're proposing a new system. We call it the Galactic Assembly." Images appeared on the council screens. Diagrams, proposals, new rules for how species would interact. Tarn studied them quickly, his scales shifting from nervous shimmer to something like surprise. "You're proposing equality," he said. "Every species gets one vote regardless of how old or powerful they are." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "No more ultimatums. No more comply or be destroyed. Species work together, negotiate, compromise. You know, like adults. The galaxy will fall into chaos," one of the bolder beings protested. "Young species will start wars. There will be disorder." "Maybe," Sarah admitted. "But that's better than the order you've been maintaining. The archive we found had records, you know. Records of every species you've brought into compliance over the centuries. Some of them didn't survive the experience. Others lost their independence and became client states. You called it peace. They called it conquest." Admiral Webb appeared beside Sarah on the screen. "And before anyone suggests you can just ignore us and continue as before, let me show you something." The view changed. It showed space around the council's home systems. Every major world, every important station, every trade route. And in every image, human ships were visible. Not threatening, not attacking, just there, watching, waiting. "We're not occupying your territory," Webb said, "but we're patrolling it, making sure nobody gets any ideas about forcing compliance. These ships will stay here until the assembly is established and functioning. Think of them as peacekeepers, if you like, or think of them as a reminder. Either way, they're not leaving." The council chamber erupted in protest, but Tarn raised his hand for silence. He looked tired, like he'd aged a decade in the past few weeks. "And if we refuse? If we try to continue the council as it was?" Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Then we'll be disappointed, but we won't start a war over it. We'll just make sure that any species who wants to be independent can be. We'll offer protection to anyone who asks. We'll share the technology we found in the archive with species you've been keeping primitive on purpose. And eventually your council will be irrelevant. You'll be a group of old species sitting in a chamber, issuing orders that nobody follows." She paused. "Or you can work with us. Help build something better. A galaxy where species cooperate because they want to, not because they're afraid. Your choice." Tarn looked around the chamber. He saw anger on some faces, fear on others. But on a few of the younger members' faces he saw something else. Hope. "How do we know you won't become what we were?" he asked. "How do we know you won't use this power to control others?" Admiral Webb answered. "You don't. You have to trust us, just like we had to trust that you'd honor your word when you gave us 6 months. Except we're going to do better than you did. We're going to prove ourselves through actions, not threats. Another transmission came through. This one from a species the Council had brought into compliance 200 years ago. The humans came to our system yesterday, their representative said. They offered us the technology to defend ourselves. No strings attached. No demands for loyalty. They just gave it to us and left. If they're trying to control the galaxy, they're doing it wrong. More transmissions started flooding in. Species reporting human contact, human offers of help, human sharing of technology. None of it came with demands or requirements. The humans were just giving away what the Council had hoarded for centuries. Thrace's light shifted to a thoughtful yellow. They're buying loyalty without asking for it. It's actually quite clever. It's not clever, Tarn said slowly. It's honest. They really do want cooperation, not control. He turned to the Council. I'm going to vote to establish this assembly. Anyone who wants to join me can. Anyone who doesn't, well, you're free to leave. That's the difference between us and them, I suppose. We always demanded unity. They're offering us a choice. The vote took 3 days. It wasn't unanimous. Some of the older council members refused to participate and left to their home systems, angry and bitter, but enough voted yes. Enough saw that the galaxy had changed and the only choice was to change with it or become irrelevant. The Galactic Assembly held its first meeting a month later. Every species sent representatives, even the ones that had been barely spacefaring. The Council's old chamber was expanded to hold thousands of delegates instead of 12. The crystalline structure that had been designed to make visitors feel small was modified to make everyone feel equal. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the center of the chamber, but she didn't stand alone anymore. Tarn was beside her. So was Admiral Kresh, representing his species now instead of the old council. Others joined them, species that had been enemies or strangers all working together on new rules for how the galaxy would function. This isn't going to be easy, Sarah told them. There will be arguments. There will be disagreements. Species will do things other species don't like, but we'll handle it through discussion, not ultimatums, through negotiation, not force. And if a species refuses to negotiate, someone asked, if they try to conquer others, then the assembly will respond, Admiral Webb said from where he stood at the edge of the chamber. Behind him, through the transparent walls, human ships were visible. Still there, still watching, but we'll try every other option first. Thrace floated forward, his light a calm green now. I want to apologize to humanity for the threat, for the arrogance, for forgetting that peace isn't the same as control. Apology accepted, Sarah said. And we want to apologize too, for the secrecy, for not explaining where we went or what we found. We were scared and angry and we didn't trust you. Maybe we could have handled it better. Maybe we all could have, Tarn agreed. The assembly's first session lasted for days. They established basic rules. No species could issue ultimatums to another. No military action without assembly approval. Technology sharing was encouraged but not required. Disputes would be mediated by neutral parties. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. 3 months later, the human fleet began to pull back. Not all the way, but enough to show trust. The ships that stayed were redesigned, painted with assembly colors instead of human military gray. They became the assembly's peacekeepers, crewed by volunteers from dozens of species. Admiral Webb retired from military service and took a position teaching at the new Assembly Defense Academy.